Cam Newton was the code way before Lamar Jackson came along, kind of like a forerunner, a layer of a foundation for what was called the dual threat quarterback. But their comparisons are shockingly similar. Find out next on the GM. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GM. It is your guy, Boulanger. Up next, we're right back into the series called Cheat Code. And in this video in particular, and in the next one, we're going to be doing a Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton comparison. Do me a quick favor, hit like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you get updates when we upload new content. Let's go. So, Boulanger, why are you doing this comparison? Well, I'm glad you asked. The purpose of doing this comparison is because there is a trajectory that Lamar Jackson is on that I need him, the Ravens need him, the fan base needs him to avoid. And so Cam Newton is a prime example for that trajectory. So in this first video, I'm going to be doing a few things. I'm going to be talking about the narrative, the storyline around their first 5 years. I'm going to be talking about the similarities in that storyline. I'm going to be talking about their careers up until that point, meaning the first 5 years. And then I'm going to give a take and assessment to lay a foundation for part 2 of this video. So let's go. So most of the time when quarterbacks are compared, it's because their games are similar. Maybe it's because maybe they were drafted in the same draft class, something like that. And so there's been a few assessments, a few comparisons between Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton, basically because of their playing style. Now, let's be very, very clear, okay? Cam Newton and Lamar Jackson do not have the same body type. They do not have the same game. Same meaning exact, but they do have similarities in their game. Okay. Cam Newton is much bigger. He's 6'5"-ish, 245. Lamar Jackson is about 6'2", about 215. So what Cam Newton would do as a player and what Lamar Jackson does as a player are very different. Okay. But their storylines are so similar that you'll be shocked to hear some of the comparisons. So let's go. So first and foremost, they both were Heisman Trophy winners in college, being the best players in the nation for an entire season for sure. Okay. As they entered their respective drafts, the only thing that was similar is that they were both first-round picks. Okay, Cam Newton was the #1 overall pick in 2011, whereas Lamar Jackson was the 32nd overall pick in 2018. But yet and still, they were still first round picks. Another similarity is that the narrative or the descriptive about both these players were similar. Lamar Jackson was said to be a running quarterback, a athletic quarterback, and inaccurate. Cam Newton had the same narrative. He was athletic, a running quarterback, but inaccurate. Okay. They both were drafted by run-first, defensive-minded teams. Both Carolina and Baltimore are just that. Because of that, Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton, neither one were given the requisite weapons to propel their careers further in those first 5 years. Both Lamar and Cam favorite targets were tight ends. Lamar Jackson, his favorite target up until this point has been Mark Andrews. Cam Newton's favorite target throughout his career in Carolina was a tight end, Greg Olsen. Lamar Jackson's best wide receiver up until this point in Baltimore was Marquise Brown, who is a 5'9" wide receiver. Cam Newton's best wide receiver in Carolina was Steve Smith, who was also a 5'9" wide receiver. Lamar Jackson lost his best wide receiver, Marquise Brown, after 3 years, where he had went for 1,000 yards. Cam Newton lost his best wide receiver after 3 years. After Steve Smith had went for 1,300, 1,100, and almost another 1,000 yards. His last season in Carolina. We know who Steve Smith is very well because he joined the Baltimore Ravens after that point. Both Lamar and Cam both won Heisman trophies. Not Heisman trophies, excuse me. They won MVPs in their first 5 years in the league. They both did that. Lamar was a unanimous MVP. Okay. Both Cam and Lamar has had 3 offensive coordinators in their first years on their respective teams. Lamar Jackson, I think it was Marty Morningwig, Greg Roman, and now the switch in his 5th year, really going into his 6th year, is now Todd Monken. Cam Newton, I don't remember who was the offensive coordinator, but I know that the Carolina Panthers made a switch to Norv Turner in 2018. So what I'm saying is that both Lamar and Cam have very similar beginnings to their careers. Another similarity is that the Baltimore Ravens have made an attempt to give Lamar weapons primarily through the draft, never going out to get him a number 1 in a trade or in a free agency pickup. And I know when players did not want to come to Baltimore in free agency, that still didn't mean that they couldn't have traded for a number 1 wide receiver. Cam Newton never had a number 1 receiver after Steve Smith departed. The Carolina Panthers drafted Kelvin Benjamin the year they let Steve Smith go. And Kelvin Benjamin never became what he was supposed to become. They drafted a couple of other pieces after they drafted Kelvin Benjamin that never really worked out. And neither one of those guys that they drafted is in the league at this point. Lamar Jackson has had multiple picks spent on wide receivers, and they just haven't worked out, mostly due to injury. Okay, so the storylines up until this point is very, very similar. Now, here's a take that you guys won't like. Over the first 5 years of their careers, Cam Newton has had the better career. Now, let me be very, very clear. I'm not saying Cam Newton is a better player. Let me repeat. I'm not saying that Cam Newton is a better player. I'm saying over the first 5 years of their careers, okay, Cam Newton had produced higher heights than Lamar Jackson. Okay. Lamar Jackson up until this point has an MVP and 1 playoff win. Cam Newton at this point in his career had won an MVP, had gone to, of course, and won the NFC Championship, and had been a attendee and a participant in the Super Bowl. Now, whether you credit a player for getting to the Super Bowl but not winning it or not, he had been there. Okay, with understanding that that each team has different schedules and different schemes offensively, which play a part. They have different roster constructions, which play a part. But the fact of the matter is that Cam had reached higher heights at this point in their career. Cam would have thrown for more yards than Lamar Jackson. Now, remember, I'm not talking about the specifics of the numbers, the percentages, completion percentages, and things like that. I'm just saying individually, Cam would have had the better career at this point. Now, if we're honest in Baltimore, okay, if we're honest in Baltimore, we would have liked to have had Lamar reach Cam Newton heights. Okay, we would. We would have liked to already have been a Super Bowl participant. Okay, we would have already liked to have seen Lamar Jackson throw for almost 15,000 yards in his career. Now he's not far off of that. He's around 12,000, but we would have liked to have seen that. You see, I understand that the wide receiver room is different and the running back room was different. And I understand that Lamar Jackson did get hurt and he missed the last 5 games of both seasons. I understand all of that. I'm not disputing that. I'm not taking anything away from Lamar. I'm just saying what we can prove on paper. Cam had the better career up until this point. Okay. But here's a scary truth. Cam had already reached his highest heights in those 5 years. That's the scary part. That's the part I want to concentrate on. That's the part that this whole two part video is about. Cam had already reached his highest heights. Cam had already won the MVP. Cam had already hit his highest passing mark, which was his rookie year when he hit 4,000 yards. Cam had already led his team to the playoffs several times and already visited a Super Bowl. And then after that 5-year mark, it started going downhill for Cam Newton. Okay. Lamar Jackson has hit a high height as the MVP, but we haven't had any advancement. And I get it. Listen, let me be very, very clear. I understand the system Lamar Jackson has played in has been very, very limited. Okay. And I know that he has a new OC this year. And I know that we have high hopes. Okay. But there is a trajectory that does exist. And I'll show you in with more detail in part 2 that we have to avoid. And so my hope is that Todd Monken and this new systematic approach, unlocking things for Lamar Jackson as the cheat code, that will cause him to reach those maximum heights. Okay. I don't want Lamar just to go to the Super Bowl as Cam did and lose. I want Lamar to go to the Super Bowl and win it all. Okay. But these first 5 years in narrative and in accomplishment are very, very similar, with the one exception being a Super Bowl visit. Okay. And so when it comes to Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton, I think they've played. I think when Cam was in New England, maybe, and I think we won that game. So head to head, of course, Lamar has the victory. If they played, I think they played when Cam was in New England. I can't remember for sure, but again, Cam had already maxed out, and my hope and my belief is that Lamar Jackson has not maxed out. But I'm going to present something in the next series of the next video that's going to kind of paint a picture of why it's important that Lamar Jackson avoids the Cam Newton trajectory. So listen, I'm your guy, Boulanger. Let me know what you want me to know. Again, it's not an exact comparison. Nothing is ever exact, but there are some similarities in the storylines of these two players over their first 5 years. I'm your guy, Boulanger. This is the GM, and I'm out.